All right, everyone. So excited to hear the wonderful pitches from all of the teams in the Space Diplomacy Hackathon event. This is the first event of its kind, and we could not be more thrilled to have your involvement and also the creativity that you all have shown throughout this week. We are excited to get started and to showcase all of the really interesting and solutions that you all have created. And so just again, as an overview, we are going to start first with team 1, then team 2, team 4, and then team 5. So we are going to ask kind of all of your elected spokespeople to remain kind of quick and ready at the draw, and everyone really have their mics off unless they are getting ready to ask a question during the Q&A portion, or if you are your team's designated speaker. And so for team 1, whoever is your speaker, would you mind just go ahead and use the hand raise feature so I can see who you are? All right, perfect. All right, so you will have about 3 minutes to give your pitch. And so without further ado, NCA, whenever you are ready, go right ahead.
Before starting, should I tell also the topic of the memo also?
My apologies, that is on me. This was my other thing that was supposed to be in my intro, and I got too excited to hear your ideas and didn't mention it. Okay, so team 1 is prompt 1. This is a team that was dealing with low Earth orbit, security, and space debris. There's no need to go into the specifics of the prompt in detail, since these are things that are been readily available on our website. And I know you all looked at them in advance to apply for the Space Diplomacy Hackathon. So that is really as much of a intro into the prompt that you need. And without further ado, now I will be quiet, NCA, and allow you to go forward with your pitch.
Thank you so much. So how do you find an address these days? The Google map of your phone is connected to a satellite in the low Earth orbit known as LEO, which navigates the directions. So without satellites, we will lose our path. So cool, isn't it? But I think we should think more. Do you know that these satellites, if they do not function, will become debris in the space? Can you guess how many debris are in the LEO? Do you know about their sizes? Low Earth orbit covers an altitude between 200 to 2,000 kilometers. And the estimation shows that more than 100 million debris of size millimeter to centimeter exist in the LEO. They are too tiny. Shall we be worried about them? Although these are so small, but due to their speed, if they collide with any other object, let's say navigation satellites or even Hubble telescope, which is also in LEO, they can damage them, and even worse, they can cause repeated collisions. So it seems these space debris are harmful. What are the solutions? These are our suggestions. First, the United Nations should establish guidelines to limit the number of the satellites that each nation could launch into LEO, depending on the size and material of the satellite. Nations are spending sustainable amount of money on developing and launching new satellites. Therefore, there should be guidelines in place to reduce the occupation of LEO by any one nation. According to UN report, 2,700 working satellites share their orbit with 8,800 tons of space debris. To reduce the debris, first we need to find ways to track them, which is not easy due to their small size. So the policy suggestion is that the nations and private sectors which are active in space technology should take the responsibility to track and collect these debris in space. Private space companies who are trying to venture space tourism or selling land on moon should be responsible enough to make such decisions. Second, the United Nations should increase public knowledge of space debris problem to empower nations to make educated decisions. Space belongs to everyone, and the public have the right to understand the problem and voice their environmental and cultural concerns to ensure the nation is moving forward. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were created for the protection of Earth. They should also introduce an additional SDG for space protection and preservation, which also help to increase public awareness. Third suggestion, the United Nations should encourage nations to ban anti-satellite weapons testing known as ASAT, which cause conflict, damage, and ongoing risks through the destruction of the satellites in space. Repeated situation of successful ASATs could also accelerate the cascading collision scenario known as the Kessler syndrome, which could render Earth's orbit unusable for future generations. So let's keep our space as clean as possible for future discoveries with the responsibility of the United Nations and stakeholders who would like to explore space more. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Team 1. We are getting ready to go into audience Q&A. So I'll maybe invoke my right as judge to go ahead and kick us off with one. So I saw in your memo and also in your pitch kind of this emphasis of space as a global commons, and that space debris is an issue for everyone. But we also have different countries that contribute differently to the space debris problem, and some actors that have left more junk in space than others. Is this kind of something that your team has considered? Is there a way to maybe ensure that those who have made space the dirtiest have more responsibility to clean up it a little bit more? Or is this something that you have considered? And invite other members of Team 1 to maybe try that question out.
Yeah, if I just go ahead, of course, we think about that. Definitely the nations and let's say even private sector that they are producing more debris, so they should also take more responsibility. Also, our suggestion is that maybe they should make a company, technology company, to find the solutions, how we can track these debris and also how we can collect them in a way that not to damage the other satellites who are functioning. Of course, the ones that they are producing more debris, they should be take more responsibility in this case.
I just want to add one thing is that, we have already mentioned in our memo as well that, the countries who are more responsible in causing these debris, they should be responsible in getting, more restrictions, and especially because, there should be some restrictions about number of satellites sending to space. So, if the United Nations takes this responsibility, so it can, in advance, it can help work with the countries who are responsible of, causing this havoc in the space.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. Well, according to the little timer that I've got here, that takes us to about 5 minutes. At Team 1, you did it. You're off the hook. And before we go on to Team 2, I want to quickly introduce our third judge who has joined us. Ambassador Pearson, thank you so much for being here today. Your timing was perfect. You joined just as Team 1 started. So I am thrilled to know that we're going to have kind of three judges for all of our 4 teams. So do you want to kind of quickly say hello to everyone so they can see you here?
I do. I am very honored to be part of this enterprise, and I've read all of the memos, of course, and listened to the first oral presentation. And I congratulate everyone for the work that's been done. And I thought that myself that there were some very, very good ideas that were put forward. So I'm delighted to be here.
Perfect. All right. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and move to our Team 2. This team addressed Prompt 2, which is space technology's impact on conflict resolution and humanitarian aid. So the Team 2 representative that is going to be giving the pitch, would you mind kind of raising your hand so I can see who you are? All right, Drew. Okay, Drew, I have got the timer ready to go, so feel free to take us away.
American futurist R. Buckminster Fuller once said, "We are not going to be able to operate our spaceship Earth successfully unless we see it as a whole and our fate as common." In other words, global problems necessitate global solutions. The worldwide prevalence of drought events due to climate change is rising. And where water stress, defined as the deterioration of the quality and quantity of freshwater resources, occurs, civil disruption, refugee situations, famine, and armed conflict may follow. The World Resource Institute projects that water stress will affect 33 countries by 2040. The Middle East is likely to face the greatest water-related challenges. Enabling the world to identify water stress before it reaches a crisis stage is the goal of our proposal. In recognition of the complex, multi-stakeholder nature of this problem, we direct our message to the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, UNUSA, which was established to govern space exploration and to enable the use of space for the benefit of all humanity. We recommend that UNUSA establish a standing committee of member states to organize private sector and government-controlled orbiting satellites to monitor global water supply and stem potential sources of conflict as a natural progression of Sustainable Development Goal 6. According to research by UNUSA, this capability would help reduce the toll that unsafe water takes on vulnerable groups, particularly children. 800 perish each day due to water access issues. UNUSA member states, including UK, US, Brazil, India, Germany, and private entities like SpaceX and Planet Labs can be involved to maximize project breadth and minimize the stress posed by individual satellite malfunctions. This effort should include the use of orbital remote sensing data to observe historical trends, understand the water stress landscape, and make projections for the future. The satellites could also monitor water reserves through optical methods such as tracking reservoir levels, snowpack amounts, and groundwater levels, and surveying spectroscopic levels like water pollution. Committee members would need to work within the legal confines of their nation states to achieve participation from relevant satellite operators. Commercial data from the project could be shared to increase public awareness and support for ongoing humanitarian efforts. This recommendation is a tool to aid in international responses to water stress, but will not obviate the threat it poses to society. Further action will need to be taken to convert the information collected through this effort into preventative action. In the event that water scarcity does lead to a societal crisis, the monitoring effort could be used to aid in the establishment of refugee quarters and camps and verify stakeholder compliance with agreements and treaties. Thank you.
3 minutes on the nose. I am impressed. All right, so I'm going to open it up to Q&A. Barbara, Giovanni, if you have an immediate question, you're more than welcome to throw it in, and also members from the audience as well.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you very much for the very interesting pitch. And this is more for you and the team. While you were doing your research, have you used or found examples of some of the interventions that you are proposing? Of course, considering that we are talking about the future, but some examples that have been even recently used that were helpful in suggesting some of the policies that you recommended?
CJ or Christopher, do you want to take this one? Christopher,
Chris,
I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that better? No, I don't think that we identified any particular instances of these kinds of interventions, and I think that we were our mindset was in large measure looking toward the future. But I do take your recommendation that we do so, that we look at potential things that have been done, so that we can learn from those lessons.
I have a question. I wonder if you looked at the climate change negotiations and found any mention there of your interesting idea of this UN committee, and whether there was any response, if there was any mention of this idea of using satellite imagery collectively to help develop a database that could be used internationally.
I'm not aware that has been discussed, but I'm very curious to see if it has, and I'll certainly follow up on that.
The closest reference that we found in this area is a DoD project that used a network of satellites and sensors to monitor forest fires throughout the United States. So we saw that as an example of how you could use a conglomeration of data to monitor ongoing environmental conditions.
Thank you.
Right, that takes us to 5. Ben, do you mind if we skip over your question? I see your hand raised.
The hand is down. Okay, next one.
Okay, I promise you will have the chance to interact with these teams afterwards too. So feel free to pepper them with more questions during the social period afterwards, if that's okay. All right, we are going to move on to teams 4 and 5. Both of these teams addressed prompt 3. So this is lunar mining and anticipatory diplomacy. So we will start first with team 4. Can the spokesperson please? All right, you beat me to it. Emma, all right, feel free to go ahead and take us away.
All right, thank you so much, Lindsay. So who should own the moon has been a question asked by nations, corporate actors, and science fiction writers alike since the beginning of our first ventures out into space. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 outlines that space should be used for the benefit and in the interest of all countries, aligning its goals similarly with the seafloor, the Antarctic, and the Arctic here on Earth. As we've continued to invest in new ways to explore the natural resources of the moon, issues of sovereignty have continued to crop up. With increasing concerns of material scarcity here on Earth, the wealth of resources found within the lunar crust has drawn the attention of many state and private actors alike. Mining on Earth has a torrid past, with many volatile, irreversible environmental damages occurring as a result of unsustainable mining practices. The moon has an incredibly fragile atmosphere and terrain, and as a relatively untouched surface, the moon also poses great scientific and aesthetic wealth that could be easily disturbed if not properly protected and monitored. The crashed Chinese lunar module poses many significant sovereignty and environmental concerns. With tensions between Artemis Accord nations and the Chinese and Russian space sectors being continually fraught, it is important that a solution to the crashed module is firm enough to establish future operating standards for conflicts in space while minimizing potential conflict escalations here on Earth. A strong solution from Artemis nations should be built off of past international norms that Chinese and Russian officials have agreed to give legitimacy to the action. In immediate response to the crashed module, we propose that Artemis nations levy an initial fee to compensate for environmental costs associated with the crash. This fee will help efforts to restore and protect the lunar environment while also serving as a deterrent to future Chinese actions. Under the 1972 Space Liability Conference, levying a fee against a state for environmental damages from crashed spacecraft has an international legal precedent, as seen in the 1981 Cosmos 954 case between Canada and the USSR. As mining activities potentially persist, the fees would increase appropriately. Artemis nations can employ coordinated tariffs on Chinese goods until mining operations cease and the modules removed from the mine site. To clarify future conflicts, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 should be expanded to address these ambiguities. We believe that to address sovereignty, the lunar landscape should be properly zoned for varying uses by nations. Through the UN, nations can seek permits to these zones for varying uses, such as mining operations, scientific exploration, settlements, etc., in accordance with preset regulations. Through a combination of immediate economic diplomacy and anticipatory long-term policy efforts, we believe that cooperation can be fostered between Artemis nations and the competing Chinese and Russian federations, setting new sustainable norms for lunar usage and future space activities.
All right, thank you so very much. So we are going to go ahead and open it to Q&A. And of course, I welcome questions for anyone, although Ben, in compensation for cutting you off before, if you want to have first rights to questions at any point here on out, I will definitely give them to you. All right, Bob, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I do. I'm very interested in the concept of the commons of space and the sharing of all Earth's people and nations in the commons. And I'm curious in your discussions whether you played around with some ideas about how this might happen. The truth is that nations that have the capability to put satellites into space do so, and nations that don't do so. So how would you, if you'd had this discussion, what kind of things were you thinking about in terms of having the broader community of nations on Earth share in the, I will say, the benefits and even the wealth of exploration of lunar mining and space?
So if I can take that, this is one part of our long-term policy pathway. We propose the revision and the opening of the Moon Treaty for signing once more, since the Moon Treaty has been promulgating benefit sharing among spacefaring and non-spacefaring nations. We think that by opening up the treaty once more, perhaps in a revised form for signatory nations, such benefit sharing may eventually occur between both spacefaring nations and developing nations and other nations that do not have spacefaring capacity right now, in order to ensure that space is not just a commons in the non-excludable, let's say, economic sense, but it is essentially a commons in the benefits for all mankind sense.
Thank you.
If you want to rapid fire your question off, and then we'll conclude with team 5.
Just a real quick question. Have you thought at all about the mechanisms by which, or I guess the venue by which conflict resolution in legal terms is resolved in terms of actual claims and things like this? Should there be an international space court at some point in the future decades?
I can take that one if you don't mind. I definitely think that is a question we played with a lot. In our idea, we were thinking of expanding the Outer Space Treaty, again, to create a committee with the UN that could serve as kind of a judiciary sense and be able to regulate more intensely some of these legislations, instead of just having something on paper that nations have to abide by.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ben has added yet further follows to my dream of having a Law and Order Space Court TV show at some point in the future. So thank you so much.
You got to copyright that right now. Copyright that right now.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to finalize everything with team 5. Can your representative please raise their hand? All right. Is it Stephen or Stefan?
It's Stephen.
Stephen. All right. Stephen, feel free to go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, alrighty. So we are team 5. Our team name is the Lunar Landers, and we are addressing our memo to the Director of the Office of Space Affairs at the U.S. State Department. So basically, the current dispute, bottom line up front, over helium-3 mining highlights the need for the U.S. to lead the development of 2 updates to the UN's Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space's guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space. First off, there should be an update to the registration process for all space objects to establish clear usage rights on a particular part of any celestial body like the moon. Second off, there should be a dispute resolution process that we established to arbitrate competing claims on celestial surfaces containing valuable resources like helium-3 on the lunar surface. So, a little bit of background. Right now, space is currently valued at $350 billion, and will probably grow to over $1 trillion by 2040, making it really important for the US to lead in harnessing space resources. The Outer Space Treaty from the 60s, or OST, provides preliminary international guidelines for sharing celestial bodies like the moon, but unfortunately, it doesn't really address land usage rights that are important for new opportunities like lunar mining of helium-3. Currently, the US-led Artemis Accords support private sector efforts to secure valuable lunar resources. However, increasing international competition, especially from non-Artemis nations like China and Russia, could escalate to military conflict if current ambiguities aren't addressed. Unfortunately, the Outer Space Treaty doesn't address whether non-governmental operators like mining companies can claim territory and own resources that they extract from celestial bodies, meaning that Artemis states have currently few options if multiple parties claim territory on celestial body for applications like mining. Compounding this problem, while state parties have agreed to inform the UN Secretary General of space activities and maintain a record of registered space objects, there is still a gap in the registration process when it comes to the intended use of space objects on the surface of celestial bodies like the moon. So what would our proposed guidelines look like? Well, the revised registration process we're calling for should specify the anticipated, number one, location of the operation in question, number two, timeline of the operation, and number three, the types of operation described as the intent to do one or more of the following: mine or extract resources for sale, conduct scientific research, or perform some kind of routine maintenance. This process would at the very least clarify intent so that crash landed space objects, like for instance, an unmanned Chinese spacecraft, might not be repurposed for other operations without a formal update of a space object registration to this central arbiter. So additionally, we also propose that guidelines detail the process for state parties to the Outer Space Treaty to peacefully resolve disputes through either some form of bilateral negotiation or arbitration through another mutually agreed upon third party. The new dispute resolution process would allow for peaceful resolution of competing claims on celestial body surfaces and their resources. These proposed updates to space object intent and dispute resolution would promote US space innovation and leadership through the Artemis Accords and bolster the Outer Space Treaty's original goals for peaceful shared use of celestial bodies, hopefully preempting potential geopolitical conflicts like the one in question. And with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions. You might be muted.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was interested in the memo to the law of the sea process by which disputes were settled and addressed. And I wondered if you found that to be directly applicable or if you were using it as an analogy for the kinds of solutions that might be presented in your paper.
Oh, Stephen, I can take that one.
Yeah, of course.
This is Carl. I'm one of the other team members. Yeah, I think Ambassador Pearson, we were more so using it as an analogy for what kind of solutions could work in space. We know there's a lot of differences. One that we talked about is that for the law of the sea, our understanding is that usually it's between two states that are trying to resolve a difference. So bilateral negotiations are often more successful. And what we were noticing with the lunar mining question is usually there's, like for Artemis Accords, there's many states, and the China-Russia group, there's also many states. So it might be more successful to use a third-party arbitration. That was our thought. And if anybody else had wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. So yeah, that was our thinking. It's like a lot about that precedent, so sort of applying it further.
Okay, our time is kind of starting to run to a close. So if there aren't any further questions, I will go ahead and pause this right here. To all of our 5 teams, congratulations, you finally did it. You can kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Your work in the hackathon is officially done. So we know that up until this point, your time with one another has been kind of confined to your groups, and you haven't really had the chance to get to see and know the other participants that are in this event. And you really should, because you have some truly, truly amazing people in this hackathon with you, tuning in from all over the world with really fascinating backgrounds. So what's going to happen next is that I am going to create a series of breakout rooms. And one of them is going to be exclusively for judges. So that is the one room that you cannot enter, the one area where the light does not touch. And for that, that is where that was a Lion King reference, if anyone did not understand that. For that one, the judge is going to go in there, deliberate a little bit more, talk about what they were seeing in the pitches. And the other 3 are open to you to mingle as you see fit. So we are going to have a couple of breakout rooms. I'm going to copy and paste kind of their themes and some sample questions to ask one another within those spaces. Because we are in a summer setting, I have titled them off of TV shows, off of movies that kind of fit the theme. Hold on one minute. So one of them is going to be called Adventure Time. So this one is where you can join to discuss and to share any stories that you may have related to adventure. Swap your travel stories, talk about where you want to go, things that you've done, plans that you may have on the horizon. And as far as the other two rooms go, one is going to be 500 Days of Summer. So since we are in summer, talk about what your summer plans are. Do you have something fun that you are planning to do? What is something that you have enjoyed doing in summers of past when you were a kid? Do you have a favorite summer memory or something that means or signifies summer to you? And the last one, Space Jam. Couldn't be a space diplomacy hackathon if I didn't have at least one space themed breakout room. And that one is basically a little bit more of a debrief about this event. So what is something that you really enjoyed? What did you learn? What did you truly kind of take away from this experience? And also similarly, do you have a favorite kind of space themed movie, book, or TV show? And what is it and why do you like it? So without further ado, let me go ahead and put those in the chat, and then we will go ahead and send you off. So this is the rules for Adventure Time. Here is 500 Days of Summer. And then lastly, we have the Space Jam one. So you are welcome to go in and out of these different breakout rooms as you see fit, as conversations strike your fancy. The judges will kind of reconvene and bring everyone back to the main room after about 40 minutes or so, and we'll then kind of conclude the event and reveal all of the results. All right, so without further ado, the breakout rooms are now going to be open. And judges, if you would just head your way over to the judges corner, I will see you there.